Well, hello, my fellow Eternians. Gary here. Now that I'm passing the time doing reviews during this COVID crisis, I really wanted to do one on 1987's Masters of the Universe, starring Dolph Lundgren and Frank Langella as He-Man and Skeletor, and Courtney Cox as Julie. This was one of those videos I begged my parents to rent every time we went to the video store. Actually, even more so than the Superman films. Despite the choppy storytelling, maybe it comes from the nostalgia, but as an adult, I still find what they did with the story satisfying. Definitely not fulfilling, though. The film isn't solely about He-Man battling it out with Skeletor. Of course it is. But it's also about a young couple who are driven apart by loss. And as they are ready to part, they're put in an unbelievable adventure. I've always had a feeling that when Courtney Cox's character Julie attempts to leave Kevin and is headed for the airport, they never explain where she's going. I took it to believe that wherever she was going to remain in a rut. Her emotions and her grief may have sent her into a dark path. And so when He-Man arrives and she is forced into this adventure, she comes out in this new light. One thing that always crossed my mind when watching He-Man is you have this Eternians battling each other out on Earth. But it doesn't dawn on anybody that they just made first contact with aliens. I guess you could chalk it up to time constraints. Like a film like this should have, its cartoon predecessor has sorcery, mysticism, and heavy mythology on several characters. In the film, it's just the residue of any of those elements. The film also acts as if it is a final confrontation between He-Man and Skeletor. There are a couple of comments of sieges and battles from the past that link right in with the cartoon. It kind of makes everyone in this film veterans, but if they were trying to start a franchise, why'd they start at the end? The makeup and costume, I'd say, are pretty accurate for the time this film was made, Skeletor being the best and most impressive. It's just a prosthetic on Langella's face. It's very noticeable, and you can see sweat and texture on it. Far from being a skull, but it's still, Lundgren's He-Man is actually pretty cool too. With a centered chest plate that straps around his shoulders and lats, this incarnation, he also wears a red cape. But there are at least 3 characters I've noticed with prosthetic masks. When they speak, their dialogue, their lips don't fully move with the words that they speak. But you have to forgive and just run with it. Langella's Skeletor was very frightening, and his voice is not the laughing, squealy voice you'll hear from the cartoon. It's heavy, intimidating, and superior compared to the animated version. When he spoke, he got my attention as a kid. He had this voice of a strict grandfather or uncle you didn't want to mess with. There's a scene near the end on Earth. Everyone's on a rooftop trying to put together a melody for the cosmic key that takes them back to Eternia. Skeletor has tracked them, and his little open ship with red glow filling it slowly rises above the roof. As you can see an unfocused Skeletor stare in their direction, it's like something eerie in a nightmare you could get a glimpse of before you wake up. The film is also full of incapable henchmen, 3 of which are made for the film alone, and one familiar one is Beastman. Though they're in a decent amount of the short runtime, they're not utilized the most effectively. They're around just enough to fight and be defeated by He-Man easily. The final battle with He-Man and Skeletor ends, of course, as a sword fight. And as low budget as it looks, it still amps me up. To see them go at it, this is really the only time during the film He-Man uses his signature "I have the power" phrase. And as a kid, or even as an adult, seeing that live action, it just excites me. I love the intro to the movie as well, and the narration along with the film's tone and music, which is heavily inspired by popular scores from Star Wars and Superman. There are moments where the film does take itself pretty seriously, and that only arises when scenes that involve more of the mythology of He-Man. And the ending always gave me these chills. When Julie wakes up in her bed after returning home from Eternia, she arrives before her parents leave, which is significant. And it becomes not only a space travel film, but also a time travel one as well. And the idea of Gwildor being able to help Julie with that, without much or any knowledge of her past, to me gave me the film more depth in the mysteries of the universe on the side of Eternia. The overall film, even for its time, still could have been better. I've heard once before that producers cut funding and that caused the unfinished ending. But 33 years later, it's still fun to watch. It's still a silly movie with overmountable flaws. Some of the dialogue is questionable, but there are some great lines coming from Skeletor himself. The performances, most notably Lengella's Skeletor, is the high point in the film. But everyone, including Dolph Lundgren, performs pretty well. To add more here, it's been known that Warner Brothers and now Sony have tried and failed over the years to produce a new and more authentic He-Man franchise. I honestly would like to see this film be incorporated as part of that franchise. In the background somewhere, maybe as a distant memory to He-Man. Those are my thoughts at least. And always, thanks for watching. Please share. If you agree or disagree, put a comment down below me.